The Athene Real Talk Podcast explores controversial ideas to stimulate debate and active thinking. These ideas do not always reflect Athene's personal views. Welcome to the Athene Real Talk Podcast.
He has been called the best gamer in the world, hands down.
World-famous gamer and philanthropist Athene.
Gaming for Good, it's called, has raised more than $20 million.
Using his notoriety to raise money for charity.
On activism, science, culture, and self-development.
Proud to have him in the studio today. I would not want to take you on in a video game.
First, what I want to say is opinions of other people don't matter so much, The reason why it doesn't matter so much is because the only extent to which an opinion should matter to you is the extent to which it has an impact in your life. And since you know that other people don't really care about you, it's much more easily to look at opinions of people in a more detached way, an objective way. And I think that's really something, it's a really nice way of going about things. It allows you to really learn about other people and really scrutinize what people say and just go okay, is this helpful or is this not helpful? And that's why when you see how I go about life in a very calculated way. When I talk to someone, I always think what do I want to achieve from this conversation? People that are more selfish do the same thing, but they want to achieve something for themselves. I just go about it and I think, how can I contribute to the world through this conversation? And when you have a very analytical way of going about life and you're less impulsive and you're less into your thoughts and your emotions, you can really much more easily create structure and direction with what to do with your life. And when you talk to people, you just have a much better view on also what they want. Certain people that are in their thoughts or in their emotions, just knowing what their core value is immediately makes you realize what they want. If what they care about most is money, when they talk about to you, you know that there is not so much trust and their only thing they trusting is money. And it really very easily allows you to calibrate the person and position him and why his motives. And having a good idea and being very structured and being outside your head, so looking at your emotions, your thoughts really allow you to go about your agenda in a very structured and rational way and allows you to achieve what you want in a much more effective way. Of course, if what you want is more focused on yourself, selfish needs, you will always be less capable and less efficient at it is than if you're doing it from a selfless point of view. Because if you go about it in a selfish way, it's more like a taking mindset. And when you're in a taking mindset, you're more needy and it shines through. While if you're in a giving mindset, you more easily gain trust and you're not as needy because you're just there to help. And that's the thing, when people realize these things, that's why people that are more giving are more selfless, are more, not just attractive, but also are more successful and are more, people like to be more around them. And it's just the kind of mentality and mindset that really allows you to also be more fulfilled and happy. So I've also talked quite a bit about selflessness and selfishness, but basically selflessness is just more in line with what you are, is understanding that the environment is part of what you are. And you might say, how does that mean? If you take away identity out of the equation, because identity is just flawed, because it's just a story, you're basically an ever-changing unit without center. Your neural activity is all what you are and constantly changing. Just imagine being a clone, being cloned and thinking okay, let's say you were the clone, would you fall into an identity crisis? If you do, that means you're believing in something that is not real, because a clone is as real as you. It's actually the same thing. It's a really good thought experiment to do. Imagine you're the clone, would you fall into an identity crisis? But just not being able to be attached to your past and such, and just understanding your ever-changing unit and your neural activity really allows you to understand your environment is literally part of what you are. When I talk to you, for example, now, this conversation takes place within your experience, within your brain. The external ID is a concept within your brain. It's even your hand, when you feel your hand like this, it's taking place in your brain, even though you feel it outside your brain, right? But it's not. It's actually mapped inside your brain. Space is mapped. If they cut your arm, there's actually phantom limbs where you still feel your hand, you feel like moving it and such, while it's not even there. And you feel it just as much as in space. The spatial experience of your environment is all taking place inside your head. It's quite crazy, actually. But if you realize that, you understand your environment, and the disconnect between you and others is just one that happens inside your head, and what you are is literally everything you experience. And that's what the true self is. The true self is selfless. Your environment is part of who you are. So if you want to grow and you want to make a difference and you want to have an impact and move forward, it is as a collective, because that's what you are. You're the people around you, your beliefs, your ideas, your language, everything is basically interconnected. And if it wasn't for your ancestors or for the parents of your ancestors, you wouldn't even exist. Your ability to speak wouldn't even exist. And that is something that a lot of people don't realize. There were cultures in the past where people were identifying with what their ancestors did. And as a result, they really felt guilty if their ancestors did something shameful. Now you would say that's crazy, right? You say, like, why would I be responsible for what my ancestors did? But the thing is, the same applies about your story. Why would you attach yourself value to your story if being able to just learn from the experience and not being attached to it allows you to be more compatible and more successful at life? It's very similar. But yeah, what I just wanted to say, like the selflessness, I just wanted to bring it quick up, the concept of selflessness. But I also want to talk about how the reward center that you have, that people are actually like craving for, is completely unrational. There is no rationality. There's no ethics. There's no morals. So basically, it's actually a very simple process. You just feel rewarded and you want more. It's like a child trying to really scam or do whatever the fuck, feeling no remorse whatsoever, just because it wants the reward. And if you realize that fully, that the reward center has no morals, has no ethics, it's just you wanting something, you can start realizing that certain people, when they are in a very taking mindset and have grown up in a certain way, can be very, very selfish and can really do everything just to stimulate the reward center. It just makes you realize this is more for people that are more into a giving mindset and don't have the ability to understand why people can grow and be so selfish. It's because the reward center is just a mechanic that allows you to want to give you will to achieve things. And if you take that out of the equation, basically people would just not give a shit. They just want to stimulate the reward center, even if it's about doing good and such. A reward center is very central. And that's something I've learned through doing research about self-esteem and such. Yeah, here Zizi Cole says, what is the goal in your life and why would that be a good goal? It's a good question. And the thing is that people, when they go through life, they think everybody has their own meaning, right? That's what you get taught by society. That's what you get conditioned to believe. But it's actually bullshit. Everybody has exactly the same meaning, the same purpose. You might say, like, how can you say that? It's like, it's not about me saying that. It's just like facts and science. In order to understand what your purpose is, you got to understand what you are. And if you want to understand what you are, you got to understand evolutionary biology, where you came from, how you came to existence. Understand neuroscience. And when you go through this entire process, your ability to evolve from stardust to what you are, and even ask the question of what is your purpose, is built on how things have been moving forward and evolved and become more and more progressed. And basically just moving forward in that direction is what your purpose is. And you might say, like, yeah, but what if I don't want to? Like, then you wouldn't exist. It's a dysfunctional belief. If nature wouldn't have evolved and followed the patterns of being more in line with reality and progressed, you wouldn't even be able to exist. And a lot of people, and this is a very, very important thing, a lot of people, when they think about purpose and they say the universe has no purpose, they're actually making a very big mistake. And let me tell you which one it is. The mistake is a linguistic one. And the best way I can explain is by giving you an example. If you would ask a blind person, what do you see? You would think a blind person sees black, right? Like sees just, like the way you imagine black, like void, nothing. That's what you think, right? But the problem is a blind person sees as much as you see through your elbow. And he might say, like, but wait a minute, like, I don't see anything, but that's what a blind person sees. Seeing does not exist. And same with purpose. When you think about purpose and you say the universe has no purpose, you actually are talking about the opposite of purpose, which is no purpose. But the concept purpose would not even exist if it wasn't for you. So even just saying the universe has no purpose makes no sense. I wonder how many people realize what I just said. Because a lot of people sometimes really go like, yeah, but the world has no purpose. Like, it's bullshit what you're saying. Like, the emotional attachment you have even about the word purpose is already showing that you are the one that is giving purpose a definition and a meaning. And, moving forward and being in line with what you are is what your purpose is. And it's moving forward in the most effective way as humanity. How can I find out that my friends are real friends? Slevin, I'm going to answer your question. And the way I'm going to answer your question is going to go really deep, because you're not really asking, how can I find out how my friends are real friends? That's not your question. The real question you ask is like, you have a certain attachment to your friends, an emotional attachment, and you are compensating for other things that are more deeper than that question. And the thing is, the reason why I'm saying that is it has a lot to do with self-esteem. The extent to which you really feel good about yourself by being around good friends says more about the lack of reward center being stimulated because of your idea about the self rather than your friends being real friends or not. And the reason why I'm explaining this is because most of people's questions, the answer to the question is not the real answer you want. The answer you want is why you're asking the question in the first place. The motivation of asking the question is more important than the answer to your question. And that applies to everybody's questions. And the moment you start understanding the motives of your question, you go to the core of who you are. And the thing is that when it comes down to friends, and let me give you an answer to your friend, friends are defined by the connection you have. If your connection is video games, then you will have these friends as long as you play video games. Once you stop playing video games, these friends will fade away. If your connection is college, then they will fade away when you're done with college. Like, that's just what happens with everyone. And the thing is, like, you can be really attached to your friend, but the reason why you're attached to your friend is because it's actually making yourself feel good about yourself. But you should feel good about yourself, not because of your friend. You should feel good about yourself because you have a good insight of yourself and you have good self-esteem. So yeah, the need for having good friends is more something that comes from, like, I would say, of course, having good friends really allows you to more easily grow and achieve your goals, but like being really needy about it, being something that you find really important, says more about low self-esteem than about your friends. And that is something that can allow yourself to calibrate, because the problem does not become your friends, the problem becomes yourself. And that is something that is very important. When you go through life, what is very important is to always try and make yourself the problem. That's something I always do. Because if the problem is outside your circle of influence, then there is no use to think about it. So I always try to make the problem mine. Even if someone else fucks up, I always think, how could I have overcome it? Same with your friends. If you think like, are these guys really good friends, right? Like, I wouldn't go about it that way. I wouldn't say like, are these guys really good friends? I would say, why do I need good friends? Because the more you are independent, the more you are able to fall back on yourself and actually, like are consistent and stable, the more you will be able to grow and achieve things and be a better version of yourself. Does that mean you have to go solo? Of course not. We have been achieving everything we did because we are a social animal. But at the same time, that doesn't mean that you have to go about it in an ineffective way, inefficient way. And that's also something that I said before. It's very important, like when it comes down to all these, ideas and stuff, you can, of course, through experience, you can learn a lot and you can speak out of your experience and stuff. But to me, it's not about just being able to experience it and absorb these insights myself. To me, it's about being able to communicate them and back them up with science. If I can't back up what I say with science, I'd rather shut up. And that's the thing. That's why I like a lot more what I say, because you can backtrack it. Because sometimes you can have an experience and generalize or do stuff that is not so accurate. And when you inspire other people, you have a responsibility. And that's why I always try to be very scientific with what I say. And that's why I value what I say so much more. And that's why I think people should give me much more intellectual authority than other speakers. Because most speakers don't speak from a detached scientific angle. They speak from an ego or identity angle where they're emotionally attached to what they say. And as a result, they cannot be as good as a source. And that's why I really like to talk about these things and really establish these kind of things, because it allows you guys to really project on these things and do your own research, to think for yourself. You don't have to take anything I say. You can do your own research. You can look up the validation seeking. There's articles, I linked them last time, about validation seeking and self-esteem. Like what I talk about today and the connections I make, it's just like there's actually articles about it. When you read the book of Eckhart Tolle and he talks about, the pain, whatever, like all these concepts are so spiritual or so, of course the insights can be handy, but if there's no strong scientific foundation, then you're literally just, you might just be a quacker. That's what I don't like about it. You cannot critically think. You just have to accept it. That's why I love science so much more. That's why I think these conversations, like what Eckhart Tolle says, can help people. And I'm really glad that it does help people. But I want to do better. I want to give people also the science behind it and corrigate the flaws and mistakes. And that's the problem with Power of Now. It's quite spiritual. But at the same time, if it helps people, whatever works, I'm always, like, at the end of the day, reality is what it speaks. So if people say, like, it's really helpful, like, I will just say people like, yeah, check out the Power of Now, even though it's important for people to not lose themselves in there. Always try to learn what you can learn from something and let go what you can let go. How would you define success for yourself or in general in Butter? What is very important is that you're never outcome dependent, but result oriented. Outcome dependent means you are emotionally attached to the outcome. Result oriented means you do what you thought was best, and the outcome is basically just something that allows you to learn. Let's say you play poker. I like poker as a good example. You can sometimes play your hand right and still lose your hand, right? But overall, if you play a million hands, you will be a winning player. And life is very similar. You can sometimes make the right call, and yet still it can go against you. And when you're just very non-outcome dependent, the way that it translates, for example, here is, if I take a guy to come over to work in this environment, and like he only has 5% to work out, you could say, in 95% of the cases, you made the wrong call. No, because overall, it is a plus EV call, because 1 in 20 will work out, and that's worth it. And that's the thing, if you're not outcome dependent but result oriented, you can start making bets that even if you lose, you're not attached to the outcome. That's how you're a successful investor, successful poker player, successful at life. So what is success? How do I define success? I define success the extent to which you are actually in line with reality and the extent to which you are moving forward and being the best version of yourself at any given moment, but in line with reality. Because you could say like, yeah, my best version of myself is becoming a singer. You can lie to yourself. No, it has to be scientific. But I also want to say like what I think, it's going to sound a little bit crazy, but I do think if you grow as a person more and more and more, and you understand the purpose to move forward and making a difference. Like, I'm going to give you guys a little bit insight in me. I started Real Talk almost 2 years ago. And basically, Real Talk has brought Ricardo first to apply and come over. And I always wanted to grow as a group because I think one of the most important things, once you are more in a giving mindset and you've overcome all these flaws of like self-esteem and all that shit, finding like-minded people to work together towards a common goal and make a big difference has the biggest impact. Because you can achieve more with two than with one. So the sum is always greater than the individuals together. And finding more people really allows you to strengthen your impact. And that's why, me working with Reese has been quite mutually rewarding and has been able to be a very much added value in our impact. So the reason why I'm saying that is because if you grow and you're more insightful and, you start getting this insight, finding like-minded people is the best thing you can do. And that's why I started this place here, even though this place is much more like I see it more like a university right now where I teach people to think really very rational and be very, right action minded and use making sense as their core value. But at the same time, in order to be able to come over here, you need to be already quite advanced person. Because if you come here for the wrong reasons, if you don't care about the world or whatever, you have a lot of stuff to work on, that's better to do that by yourself. Because we are not a psychiatry or an institution. We just try to coach people that are already quite advanced to be growing into their full potential. And that is why, if you're quite advanced person, in order to be able to come to a point where you can apply and work in this environment, you need to be quite, advanced. You need to have listened to a lot of the real talk, really decondition a lot of the bullshit, because we really grow up in a really shitty society. But once you're here, you can have such a big impact. It's insane. That's why we are literally the biggest philanthropists on the internet. We raised more than $23 million for charity, and we're really inspiring people, and we're going to step it up. We might start educational curriculums. We might start more coaching and stuff. I really think what we're doing here will have a very big impact, and that is why being part of that is one of the more impactful things you can do. Being able to make a difference and overall really working on a common goal and really moving forward as the human species is what you're designed to do. It's your purpose. But we live in a society where we grow up and where they teach you oh yeah, you're free and you can do whatever and be successful and be rich, but it's all bullshit. So many misconcepts that we grow up with. Even freedom is such an absurd concept. You don't have freedom without responsibility. And what I mean with that is if you're free but it goes at the cost of someone else's freedom, then you're inconsistent. And you can say a dictatorship is free because the dictator is free, right? But no. So you need responsibility with freedom. And the moment you connect to responsibility with freedom, you suddenly realize you're not free at all. Because if your freedom goes at the cost of people in Africa or people in China or whatever, you're not really free. You're more exploiting others. Yeah, I'm just saying we just grow up and we have all these misconceptions and such, and we can live really a very narrow-minded life where we take so many things for granted. And the reason why I don't like to talk so much about these things is because it's more dissonance. It's more confrontational. And it's something that people can only grow into later in life when they are more, self-aware. Same with veganism or vegetarianism. There is so many reasons to be vegetarian that you almost wonder why it's not everybody like that. But it's too controversial to talk about it because people get really triggered and their ego gets activated. And as a result, they don't think anymore, even though all the facts are there. And that's the thing, that's why even more important than facts, is the ability to get through to people and open them up so they develop a certain level of awareness to think more rational and more unbiased, because as long as they are narrow-minded and unaware, they don't have the ability to process the information, and you're just basically doing more damage than good. I also wanted to say something like the way I go about life. A lot of people think they are in control. What's really controlling you is your emotions and your thoughts, and you identifying with them or backwards rationalizing them after you take action. But the best thing is to first experience thoughts and emotions, think about them as an observer, and then act, rather than the other way around. Most people just think emotions, act, and then backwards rationalize. They first type before they even think about what I said. And after they typed it, they label themselves like this is my opinion, and then they attach their value on it. That's how people go about things. You can literally talk to someone and they say an opinion just impulsively, and then they start defending it. And the funny thing is they even did 2 tests about that, where they got people to defend 2 different opinions just by changing the way they ask the questions, and then they have them argue for it and become emotionally attached to it. It's quite fascinating to think that you feel like you have this own opinion and such, but it's all these labeling mechanics and this impulsivity and backwards rationalization. Either way, being aware of these mechanics can really allow you to overcome that. But what I wanted to say, like, if you understand that you're not the one that is in charge, but your subconsciousness is basically driving most of your actions, you can basically understand why you do what you do and understand the duality that some people experience. Like, for example, why do I want to do that but I don't have the energy to do that? It's because on a fundamental core level, your subconsciousness is emotionally valuing, for example, comfort, or is valuing friendship or family or a romantic relationship or money. And as a result, your behavior becomes a result of that. And the thing is that if you are aware of that, like being aware of all these things, that's why I also talked a little about the way I go about life. Everybody has your core values. Maybe they're not really put into words, but some people have conceptualized it, but some people haven't conceptualized it. But like the way I go through life, what I value the most is making sense. It's quite advanced, but it really allows me to desire to make sense at any time. And it brings about a choiceless awareness. I just do what makes sense. I don't experience choice. And as a result, I can be very hardcore, very fulfilled, and very impactful, and very rational, even though on a fundamental level, I'm an impulsive, emotional being. But since making sense is what I value on a subconscious level the most, I'm just very rational in my behavior. And even if I'm just in the moment or in the present and I react, I am very rational. Making sense as a core value really allows you to make very rational decisions and have a gut desire. Just as much as you have a gut desire to sit on your ass when comfort is your core value on a subconscious level, if making sense is your core value on a subconscious level, you have a desire to make sense. And you might say, like, but is that easy? That's how people, religious people, if they believe in God or the love of God and they trust Jesus, then as a result, what happens is their behavior just automatically comes out of that. Because the way you are and the way you behave is all defined by the programs you run through your belief system and what you've been socially conditioned to believe. And if you grow up and you're socially conditioned to believe that making sense is crucial, then automatically you will start desiring to do so. The thing is, though, making sense is a core value that only has been able to be coming to fruition, to put it that way, because of the understanding in the brain. Because the problem with making sense is you experience extreme dissonance if something doesn't make sense. And since in the past we didn't have so much answers, it was easier to believe in God. But now with science and all the insights in the brain, you can have making sense and you can trust it and you can love it. I trust, I'm emotionally attached to making sense. And that's why I'm so rational, because I know everything makes sense. Even your behavior that doesn't make sense, the moment you understand it, it makes sense. And it's a big relief. When you go through life and you know that everything makes sense, it's like going through life and think God has a plan. It allows you to let go. It allows you to accept. Same with making sense. Making sense is just more in line with reality. So I go through life and I know everything makes sense. Even if shit happens that is really bad or whatever, I can accept it easily because I know that it makes sense. And the only thing I need to do is to understand it. And that's why all the dissonance expresses itself in me trying to understand. I want to also combine it that making sense is something that doesn't make sense if you're not fully selfless. If you're fully selfish, right? Then it doesn't make sense to make sense because you don't want to help the world. You don't want to start putting time and effort in helping other people because obviously that's what makes most sense. That's what your purpose is, right? So why would I want to make sense? So like being able to grow as a person is quite important. Being a giving person is quite important, because else making sense would cause too much dissonance. And that's something that I start realizing also, like making sense is something that sounds very unattractive to people that are more selfish. Although once you're becoming more giving, more selfless, making sense is just a logical thing to adopt. And that's why right action, people that have a very strong, emotional attachment to right action and doing good have an easier time to make sense than people that are in a comfort, because it doesn't make sense to be in your comfort bubble. That's why overcoming these things and becoming less selfish and more selfless allows you to overcome these flaws. But I want to say on top of that, like selfishness is not wrong. Selfishness is just a narrow interpretation of what you are because of social conditioning and identity, because the true self is not selfish. It's selfless. Even if you act selfish, you on a certain level act selflessly, but in a stupid way, because you think you are your identity. So all actions are inherently selfless, even the selfish ones. But the selfish ones are just more narrow-minded, selfless behavior. Selfishness is more narrow-minded, selfless behavior, because everything is selfless. Yeah, if you understand that, like just being more in line with what you are allows you to have the selfish part. It's almost like it fades away and it merges with your selfish state of what you are, which is also connected with your environment. Basically, you could see that selflessness is more being selfish in a pure way, which includes your environment, but then you don't call it selfish, because selfish means you do stuff for you. That's how you define the concept. So yeah, it's also a linguistic thing to think about, but doing stuff for yourself is automatically includes helping your environment. But you need the understanding, of course. And then what is love on a neuroscientific level is just a big scam to make human reproduce. It depends how you define love, because love can also be warmth, from your mother. Like it's also something that binds us in a social group. So depending on, everything you experience, like your need to hunger is to survive as a person. Your need of affection is to survive as a species. And your need to have sex is to reproduce yourself. So basically everything you experience and all your drives have an evolutionary reason. You can trace them back. And that's something a lot of people don't even realize. You go through life and you have all these focuses and these attachments, and you think they're personal. They're because of you or whatever, but it's bullshit. It's because of how you grew up and how the environment has, directed you to become like that, and how it also is in line with your biology and how you evolved. Like this idea, this sense of identity, this who I am, is very flawed. Okay, what is the point of talking about all these things that we can be sure of? That's a good question, Peanut Balls. And let me tell you, and this is again like, it's not so much the question, but why you ask the question. You want security and you want to be sure about stuff. And that's where you get your certainty from. So if you can be certain, you feel more uncomfortable. You experience fear. That's the reason why you even type this question. But the thing is, by embracing uncertainty, you become more certain. By embracing fear, you become fearless. That is the way how you can really grow as a person. And when it comes down to probabilities, everything is probabilities. You just have to accept that. That's the reality. But when you understand that everything is probabilities, you will just start doing what you feel are the best odds. And just accept if things don't go your way. And you just try to learn, adapt the odds, and move on. Pinball says, you are right, but I wonder if I would prefer not being able to question my own existence. The thing is, though, like what you're saying there, I understand it, and it be driven from a comfort. If you are in a comfort state and you feel like these questions and making sense causes more dissonance, then automatically you will more be steered towards the idea of being ignorant. But being ignorant, not only does it make you being less alive, but it's also less consistent and brings about more issues. And if you in the future will get to a point where, you get to experience a lot more dissonance because of a reality or whatever, you will be less able to overcome that. And on top of that also, it's like asking about bad habits. Why would I want to do something about a bad habit? The bad habit only takes time and effort to overcome for a small period of time, and then you're basically feeling better. It's actually better for your comfort and better for your fulfillment and happiness to actually go through this process. And that's why I'm feeling more fulfilled and happy than most people in the chat, if not everyone. Even though I'm working every day and I don't experience choice and I'm very making sense, I'm just very fulfilled because, and I have a much stronger foundation. I'm much more successful. I'm at everything, basically. And it's just more value for your life. even from a selfish point of view, it's better to do, you know?
Subscribe to youtube.com/AtheneWins. Watch the live stream at twitch.tv/AtheneLive and follow The Real Athene on Snapchat.